The only way to know about the maze is to have gone to it, which means to have died. The maze, as I call it, is difficult to get to. I've talked to some people that have been there, but I've been there 3 times. I think I'm the only one to have gone more than once and come back, and I think it was sheer luck. The first time I found it was an accident, of course. I was hiking up some steep rocks, I slipped, I went backwards, and then woke up on the ground with 2 broken wrists, a terrible concussion, and a lot of bruised ribs. But what happened in between my fall and my return to consciousness is what we're talking about. It's hard to explain. You know how you can picture a scene in your mind? You can make it pretty vivid, right? Well, when you go to the maze, your corpse is all you can see in your mind's eye. The angle changes, but most of the people I've talked to describe a bird's eye view. You can still focus on things around you, but you can't get that image out of your head. It's like you saw something traumatizing, and you can't stop thinking about it. And I guess seeing your own lifeless body is pretty traumatizing. Anyway, the maze. I don't really know if it's a maze, but it's the best description I can come up with. You open your eyes, and you're somewhere else. The sky is brown, but lively. It's bright enough to see clearly, but there's still an odd brown tint to everything. Everyone describes brown clouds looming just over their heads, bulging forth in a tumultuous dance among themselves. Brief yellow flashes are frequent, as if lightning is hidden just behind them, but no thunder. You seem to start in a random place, surrounded by black walls. They're tall, too tall to scale, but no ceiling above them. There are no rooms, just walls. They're pitch black, like they absorb all the light that hits them. There's another curious property to them, too. The best way I can describe it is, well, you know that dry ice fog that lays low to the ground? They emit that kind of mist, but it's black. It's fine enough to see through it, but it's still unsettling to be breathing the stuff in. Anyway, the first time I was in the maze, I was clearly dumbfounded. To my memory, I had just lost my balance on some rocks, tilted backwards, and then was teleported here with a crystal clear image in my head of the aftermath of the fall. But I was naturally curious, and after having a good look at the surroundings, including the 2 towering black walls, and my immediate options to my left and right, I turned to my left and followed the path. It took a few minutes to figure out I was in a maze, as it came to a dead end almost immediately as I turned a corner. I turned back around and went the other direction past where I had started. This is when I started noticing the sounds. Every so often, I would hear long screeches come from the air. They were echoing, so I could tell they were very far off, so they were very loud. My mind instantly jumped to a Godzilla-style monster in the distance. That's how booming it seemed. And then, there were other smaller noises, or so I think. Even after my 3rd trip there, I can't tell if that part's just my mind playing tricks on me. Quiet, just on the brink of what I can hear at all. Whispers. Sometimes random things I read at some point. Sometimes my name. Sometimes languages I can't understand. And the whole world seems to lazily tilt on some level. Never too crazily, but there are definitely times when you can feel the shift in weight in your own body. So I continue on into what I now deem to be a maze. I heard once that if you put your hand on the left wall and just follow that wall, eventually through all the dead ends, eventually you will find the exit. And yeah, that makes sense when you think about it, so that was my strategy for a while. I just followed the wall. When I first showed up there, my mind thought, oh, a maze. Like a corn maze. I didn't think of scale, just a simple, small maze. As I followed the wall for what seemed like hours, my mind started to wonder, what about that labyrinth that dude fought the Minotaur in? That was huge. Isn't there some massive tunnel system maze under Paris or some shit? Like, impossible to get out of without starving to death? I was starting to panic. I abandoned my strategy and started jogging, deciding to just go with my gut. Pretty stupid, yeah. I took random turn after turn, growing more and more winded. I stopped for a breather at a four-way intersection. However, I couldn't catch my breath. In fact, it was getting harder and harder to breathe. The image in my head was still the same, but I could feel something was wrong out there. You know the feeling that someone is watching you? It was like that, but crossed with the urgent primal need to get the fuck away from a threat. Not a good feeling. I watched in my head as I dropped to my knees, growing weaker and weaker. My broken body laid there on the ground 15 or so feet down from the path I was trying to reach, and I looked, and a young couple walked along the path I was trying to reach. Too engrossed with their conversation, thankfully, to take a look down over the rocks to see me there, dead. As they walked past, albeit not very close to my body, I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred and I collapsed onto my stomach, but slowly, as they continued their fine early autumn jaunt through the woods, I could breathe again, my vision corrected, and I could stand. I didn't put two and two together that they had something to do with my collapsing until after I made it out of the maze. I was truly panicked now. I didn't know what just happened, even though I was clearly lying there dead on the ground in my mind. That was the closest I had ever felt to death. I broke into a sprint, rounding corners every few seconds. I didn't know how long I had before I went down again, not to get back up this time. And I guess I just got lucky. About a minute into starting running, I rounded a corner and was met face to face with my lifeless corpse standing upright, eyes shut and face bloodied. It was as if my laying down position in my mind's eye had just been propped up and was running towards me without any respect for the laws of gravity. But yes, as I rounded the corner, I was met with my own messed up body running into me not a split second after I turned it. And believe me, seeing what looks like a beat-up, unconscious version of yourself running towards you suddenly, out of nowhere, is a pretty horrifying thing. But I didn't have time to stop or dodge to the side. I was mid-stride, and so was it. We collided, and I woke up. I took in a huge gasp of air as I looked up to the dimming fall sky as it transitioned into dusk. I was panicked, confused, and I had a perfect memory of what the maze was like. No one would believe me. I wouldn't believe it myself if I thought about it enough. The only way to know for sure, the people that had just missed seeing me. Despite my messed up ribs, hands, and head, this time I made the climb up the rocks on pure tenacity alone. I don't know how I had it in me to run, but in my head, they had at least a 5-minute start on me if they were real. And they were. There they were, same clothes and everything. Walking down the trail, perfectly normal. I got their attention, and we got my injuries looked after, but that part of the story is boring. I don't know what the maze is, if it's some purgatory or a test of your grits and will to live. Maybe it's just some twisted game, but one thing I do know, if those two had looked over those rocks and saw me down there on the ground, I wouldn't have made it out. So, a little advice, if you are going to die, make sure no one is watching.